Okay, as you can see, we now have the engine out and we have it all apart, and it's probably been left a bit long because everything that moves was seized. But now we obviously have the little valves, everything's moving, the rockers are moving, carburetor now is functioning, bearings and everything is okay. It's just a little bit corroded, but now we'll just get it assembled and hopefully she'll be a good engine. Right, up late last night. Okay. Oh, sorry, still filming. Okay, yeah, late one. Right, just put in another gas tank just so we can see if we can get the engine running. I did have it turn over for about 3 seconds. It did run, but the fuel we got running back through the pipe, so I don't know why, so I'll have to get electric start on it so we can get it pumped up and get some fuel and try it again. Now, if this isn't, so I want this one to be a little bit quicker than the little spacewalker, so if this doesn't work, I do have, which we salvaged from another old plane, this little, which I've not really heard of, is a JBA. Never really heard of these, and this is a 120 two-stroke. Now I think this, if all else fails, will actually fit in here quite nice. This is going to be a lot more faster than this one. This is a 2-stroke as opposed to a 4, but we'll see. But I do like my 4 strokes, so if this one's got enough go, then we'll leave it, but we'll see. So we'll have a look again later on today and see if we can get this one started. Therefore it puts pressure in the fuel tank up that tube, which then, maybe the fuel pipe's a little bit too hard. Give me a full socket. Right, it runs quite well. It's got enough power for what I want, just a little bit more tinkering. But at least now I can proceed with getting in the servos in and getting on with everything else rather than just waste my time on a duff engine. But no, it's back to life after all that time, and no, it's fine. We'll get it going and it won't be long before she's flying. Yeah, quite happy with that. Well, the engine was obviously seized up and a little bit rusty on the valves and things, but it did all clean up. The bearings were just about salvageable, just a little bit of burnt, that sort of brown toffee fuel around them, so we managed to get most of that off and obviously just run it now just to make sure it cleans up. I mean, at the end of the day, we're not spending any money on this, it's as it is, and we'll fly it without spending nothing other than just a receiver battery and a receiver. We've got a box of old servos, so that's not an issue. So really it's trying to spend as little as possible, but really just get it running as it came to us. I think it's just really just getting the carburetor finely tuned in. I am running only 10% nitro through it. Maybe I might give it a little bit, maybe 15 possibly. But no, everything seems fine. Look forward to flying it. Right, you still don't know what this plane is. It might just be a home built, but I'm not quite sure. But it is a 2 metre wingspan because as you can see the wing's quite big and that's pretty solid and it's in quite good shape. You do have to just fix the ailerons back on as the tabs are not very good, so we'll sort that out. The only one thing you have to be careful of and make sure, it's okay putting a big engine on an aircraft, but it's just making sure the actual firewall, the bit that holds the engine, is actually fixed securely to the aircraft. And the trouble is with some of these, they're on the modern planes the actual wood is all interlocked and it is pretty solid, but on some of these home built type planes they're not always that well put together. So do make sure, because there's nothing worse than starting your engine up, holding it and the engine coming away. So that's something you do have to always check to make sure it's strong. When we took this plane apart and then started putting the engine back, I did notice, and this is something I don't know a great deal about, it has a lot of down thrust. The engine is pointing down quite a lot, and the engine mount has had several holes drilled in it where someone's obviously put it in one position where it should naturally you would think it would be, and then they've drilled some extra holes to get it angled down a bit more. They've also put a little piece of wood in here to try and, so they've obviously, someone maybe with a bit more knowledge or just flying it a lot in the past has realised that maybe the plane climbs at certain speeds and then on cutting back the throttle it drops. Now the angle that the engine, the thrust angle of the engine really, from what I can gather, depends on a lot of things, but from my understanding, to make things simple, and I may be wrong, so don't use this as a Bible, if the wings, when they're on the plane, if they're slightly like this at an angle upwards, what will happen is when you accelerate, the plane is going to want to then climb. So therefore the engine has a little bit of downwards to counteract that. The idea is when your actual plane is flying at normal cruise speed, it wants to be flying level as much as it can be. So I think this is why you have a lot, plus the fact you have the torque of the motor, which might be pointing slightly to the left or to the right. So there's so many different variables as to why you have the engine pointing not just straight out the front of the aircraft perpendicular to the firewall, but hopefully this is where someone set it and this is hopefully where it will fly, otherwise it might be a very short flight. We will see. It's like it's pointing down quite a lot. But it could be the fact that these wings could be slightly up, and when it's flying it might fly at that sort of, it might be flying at that sort of level, in which case the engine's pointing, you know. Anyway, okay. This is what I was saying earlier about firewalls. Now there's quite a lot of pull from the engine, and when you look at this firewall, there's not a great deal glued to either side that's actually holding this to the aircraft. Now when you're stood at the back as you're running the engine up, it only takes over a period of time, the oil from the engine just gets into the wood, it softens the wood, it starts to break down the adhesive. I mean, modern planes, they seem to be, the firewall seems to be all plywood meshed together and locked in at a certain way, so it cannot physically move. But this one, it just looks like this is glued to the side of the sides of the plane, and at any point these could fail. So do make sure that they are well and truly glued. I mean, the Cessna that I've just finished, it comes in the fuselage in two halves. Well, at the back where it's got four little bolts holding it together, so it's a piece of plywood, that in itself is strong enough, but it's only bonded to the little bit of plastic of the actual fuselage and a couple of little rods, carbon fibre rods that run down the rest of the fuselage. So there's not a great deal there, but you're running up a 60cc motor, there's a lot of pull, and it always surprises me how they just don't fall apart. But for safety, just make sure that it is securely attached. That's the one thing you don't want, is this thing coming at you, and it would probably be just the actual throttle connection that really just saves you, really.